Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about content as reward. Now, this is a really great topic. It was suggested by Ulysses Sampaio, who said, a suggestion for a video, content as reward. This is a major overlooked thing in game dev, in my humble opinion, which I feel massively railroads player action. I agree. I can't believe I've never talked about this, and you're right, I never have. So let me talk about what it is, why I like it, why you don't see it much, and a possible solution which you may not like. So let me define what I think Ulysses meant by this and what I'm going to take it as meaning, which is if you make a game and you have content in that game that opens up and is available based on player agency, this is content as reward. Basically, it's content that is a direct consequence of player choice. The player did something, picked something about their player character, and now part of the game is opened up because of that. Now you see this a lot in things like, if you don't take lockpick, you can't pick locks. If you don't have a good dialogue skill, you can't pick a line in dialogue. But I think what I'm talking about here is like major content. And I'll go in and talk about what I mean by that. But it should be no doubt to anyone who's watched more than 2 videos on this channel that I love this. To me, anything that makes the game react to how the player is choosing to play your game is a good thing. I love it when the player goes off the beaten path and explores and finds content because of that. Stuff they're not led to. There's no quest taking you there. There's no task. You just stumbled across a cave, and inside the cave is a bunch of cool stuff. I like skills that have unlocks or perks you can buy that require point allocation to get. It's not just, spend a point on it and then here's the stuff. You may have to buy it up, like it's a master level unlock on a skill, or it's a perk that requires, 2 other perks to get. And then it opens up content in the game that otherwise wouldn't be available. I like having lots of different companions if you make a game where the player can pick up companions. And I like that those companions either whether you can get them and how they play depends on the player's skills and the player's attributes and actions the player has taken. In fact, the original Outer Worlds design had more companions in it, but you couldn't get some companions based on what kind of character you were playing. Maybe your leadership skill wasn't high enough. Maybe you chose the board path before you ran into this companion and they were just like, I'm not joining you. Or if they were in the party already, they're like, I'm out of here. You chose the board. I'm gone. Now let me explain. So now that you understand what we're talking about and how much I love it, let me explain why you don't see this that much. Content as reward has a direct result, which is some players won't see some content in your game. And sometimes it's a lot of content. Like, just let me throw out an example. Let's say that 20% of your game is something that's reactive to one of 3 things the player can do. So maybe it's the main story and the player chooses side A or chooses side B or rejects both sides. And then there's content. And it's not a lot. It's like 20% of the game. Well, let's think about that for a second. So 80% of the game is the same, but then you have 3 different 20% contents. That means the total of your game is 80, 20, 20, 20, 140. You just made a game that's bigger than the original game by almost half. So instead of having to make a game, you have to make a game and a half. That's expensive. It's very expensive for you to make content that some players will never see. And keep in mind, that's just not system mechanics and the content they can unlock. It may be new maps, it may be NPCs, it may be monsters, it almost certainly will include voiceover. All of the stuff is money to make, money to test, and then it won't be used. And from a player's point of view, they will never see it. Well, guess what? Producers on your project are not going to like that. Publishers are going to hate it because you're going to have stuff and say, hey, I need to do voiceover for 12 companions, but depending on how the player plays, they're only going to see 4 or 5 of them. What? Hey, I need to hire extra level designers to make all these maps and fill them up with encounters and loot and get them lit correctly and then test them to make sure that the things in that level work. Oh, some players won't see this. Actually, a lot of players won't see. Maybe 80% of the players are never going to see this map. What? This is just stuff that commonly gets thrown out, especially on modern games, because you're spending so much money that back when a game cost a couple million, going from 2 to 2.5 million didn't seem as bad to nowadays. If something costs 100 million and you need to make a game and a half, that's 150 million. You just asked for a lot of more money. And then your response is, oh yeah, and some people won't even ever see this. In fact, a majority of players won't ever see some of this content. Wow. Good luck getting that by your production staff, your director, if he's not convinced, he or she isn't convinced, and whoever's at your publisher who's signing these checks. They're not going to be happy. Now, I said at the beginning that there is a solution to this, which some of you aren't going to like. But that solution is procedural generation. I talked about this in another video, but if you could procedurally generate encounters, like what's in the encounter, you could make them reactive to the player. The player has done a prison break by literally blowing a hole in the side of the prison. Now prisoners show up in your encounter lists. The player has done something in the game that opened a gate to the netherworld. So now there's demons everywhere. You're going to have to make that content, and it's going to be dynamic based on what the player did. And then when he closes the gate, they should stop. So these are all encounters that you're going to need to have some of the time. Side dungeons could be like that. I love it when I'm playing a game and I explore and I find a dungeon or a cave or some hidden complex. Now, I like to replay RPGs a lot. I like it when those change. I like it too when, if they're procedurally generated, there's enough of them that if I encounter one that's locked and I don't have lockpick, I know that I can keep exploring somewhere else and I'll find something else I can do. But if your side content is fixed, I feel really weird if I'm blocked out of something because I can't pick a lock. The same thing could be for random followers. You know, it'd be nice to be able to, if you don't like the followers the game provides, if you could go to some, guild, a fighting guild, a mage guild, and say, what else you got? I kind of need somebody who's specialized in illusions. I kind of need a fighter that's got a couple thief classes and can backstab. If your game can generate random followers like that, you can eventually find someone who fits really well with what you want. A lot of games are like, nope, here are the 6 followers you get, but they're completely voice-overed. How great is that? For some people, that's wonderful. For other people, they're like, 6? All I get is 6? Rare loot can be the same way. I mean, I'm sure you all played games where the rare loot items are randomly generated, and that can be really exciting because it's like a slot machine. Every time you kill something, a powerful thing, it may drop a rare loot, and it may have just those characteristics that your particular player character wants in rare loot. That's exciting. We know that works. But the side effect of that is you have to have a really good loot system. I think quests can be generated. Once you know that like side dungeons can be generated and encounters can be generated and loot can be generated, it's a tiny step farther to just go, quests can be generated. You can spin up a dungeon with some random encounters and a rare loot at the bottom. And then, boom, now an NPC in one of your towns says, hey, my grandfather had this treasure map. Or my mom disappeared, but now I heard a rumor that she was, seen going into this dungeon. And now you explore it. And maybe you can find her and she's randomly generated. Maybe you can find the heirloom brooch, is what the NPC really wanted. It's randomly generated. That can be super, super fun. It can also make your game world bigger. It can make your game world feel way more reactive to the type of player you're making, because if you hear about a dungeon that's going to require a lot of fighting, and then there's another quest that's like you can sneak in the back, pick a lock, disarm some traps, and get in, that may be way more suited for the kind of character you're playing. Now, I already know that some people don't like this. Some people don't like procedural generation. Some of you don't like it. I get it. Some of you think it feels sterile. It feels repetitive. Some developers don't like it for the same reasons. And also, it's a little threatening job-wise. But I think if procedural generation is done carefully, like we did procedural dialogue in Arcanum, then I think the subsequent content that it opens up as a reward for the kind of character you're playing and the choices you're making can be really, really cool. I don't see this as much. It's a lot harder to procedurally generate things, good things. It's easy to procedurally generate things. It's hard to procedurally generate good stuff. It's way easier just to handcraft it and go, we have a linear story now. We have a linear main story arc, a couple side quests you can do, a slight amount of reactivity, boom, ship it. But I believe if people did things more this way, you'd get a lot more interesting reactive games. So I hope, Ulysses Sampaio, this answered your question, and I'm hoping some of you may have changed your mind a little bit about how cool a procedurally generated game could be.